Take my daughters instead of me. They haven't had water in 2 days, she begged. To the cowboy, Sarah Millfield watched the cowboy's horse kick up dust clouds as he dismounted in her yard. The animal was well fed, its coat glossy despite the drought that had turned everything else to bone and ash. Her 2 daughters pressed their faces against the cracked glass of the front window, small hands leaving smudges on panes that hadn't seen rain in 3 months. The well behind the farmhouse gaped like an open mouth, showing nothing but dry stone and the skeletons of dreams. Sarah's throat felt just as empty. "You're early." The cowboy adjusted his hat, eyes hidden in shadow. His boots made soft sounds in the dust as he stepped closer. "Debt don't wait for rain, Mrs. Millfield. I told Governor Hayes I'd have it by month's end." Sarah's voice cracked like the earth beneath their feet. Her hands found the fabric of her dress, twisting it between trembling fingers. "Hayes sent me today." The badge on his chest caught the dying sunlight, reflecting it back like a warning. Not sheriff. Something else. Something worse. The metal was tarnished silver, carved with symbols Sarah didn't recognize, but somehow feared. Inside the house, Emma coughed. The sound was dry and rattling, like leaves scraping against coffin wood. Grace appeared beside her sister at the window, both girls watching with eyes too old for their faces. "Take my daughters instead of me." The words tumbled out before Sarah could stop them. "They haven't had water in 2 days. The cowboy studied her face with the patience of a man who had heard desperate pleas before. Behind him, dust devils danced across fields where corn should have grown tall and green. Instead, the earth stretched barren to the horizon, cracked and bleeding under an unforgiving sky. "That ain't how this works." "Then how does it work?" Sarah stepped closer, close enough to smell leather and something else. Something that reminded her of graves freshly dug. The cowboy didn't answer. He turned his head slightly toward the house, where Emma's cough echoed again through the thin walls. Grace's small hand appeared on the glass, palms spread wide like a star. Sarah followed his gaze. Her daughters looked like ghosts already, pale and insubstantial in the fading light. The weight of 3 months without proper water had carved hollows under their eyes, made their clothes hang loose on shrinking frames. "Please." The word came out as barely more than breath. "Whatever Thomas owed, I'll find a way. Just give me more time." The cowboy's silence stretched between them like a noose. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out across the wasteland that used to be their home. The cowboy reached into his coat, movements deliberate and careful. Sarah's breath caught as his hand emerged holding a leather-bound ledger, its pages yellow with age and secrets. "Your husband owed more than money. Thomas is dead." The words felt like stones in Sarah's mouth. 6 months buried, and still she could barely say it aloud. Dead men leave debts, live ones pay them. He opened the ledger with practiced ease, revealing pages covered in careful script. Sarah recognized Thomas's handwriting immediately. The familiar loops and slashes that had signed their marriage certificate, that had written love letters during their courtship. What is that? Agreement he made, before the drought, before you. Sarah's knees threatened to buckle. Through the window, Emma pressed closer to the glass, her small face pale with understanding that children shouldn't possess. Grace remained, still as carved marble beside her sister. "I don't understand." "Look closer." The cowboy held the ledger toward her, and Sarah's trembling hands took it like she was accepting her own death warrant. The page was dated 3 years before she and Thomas had married. Her maiden name appeared beside his signature in ink that looked fresh despite the yellowed paper. "This is impossible. Hayes' family's been keeping records since 1847. Your bloodline." "His bloodline. They're connected." Emma appeared in the doorway, her nightgown hanging loose on her thin frame. The child moved like a sleepwalker, drawn by voices that carried the weight of adult secrets. "Mama, go inside, baby." Sarah's voice was sharper than she intended, fear making her cruel. Emma retreated, but Sarah could feel her listening from just beyond the threshold. Children always knew when the world was about to shift beneath their feet. The cowboy watched Emma disappear before speaking again. Pretty girls. Smart too, I'd wager. Sarah clutched the ledger tighter, pages crinkling under her grip. What do you want? Not what I want, what's owed. The sun had nearly set now, painting the sky the color of dried blood. Sarah's farmhouse stood silhouetted against it like a tombstone, marking the grave of better times. Thomas never told me about any agreement. Men keep secrets, even from wives they love. The cowboy's words hit like physical blows. Sarah thought of Thomas's restless nights near the end, the way he'd stare out at the well with haunted eyes, muttering apologies to ghosts only he could see. What kind of debt? But the cowboy was already walking back toward his horse, spurs jangling softly in the gathering dusk. The cowboy stopped at the edge of the well, his boots sending small stones, tumbling into the darkness below. Sarah followed, the ledger still clutched in her hands, like evidence of a crime she didn't remember committing. Your great-grandmother made the original deal. That's impossible. My family never lived here before Thomas and I bought this place. Never. What? Never lived here before? Never knew the Hayes family? The cowboy walked a slow circle around the well's crumbling stone rim. Sarah watched his movements, hypnotized by the deliberate way he placed each step, as if he was performing some ancient ritual. This well's been here since 1863. Your people dug it. We bought this land from the bank 2 years ago. You bought it back. The distinction hit Sarah like cold water thrown in her face. Emma and Grace appeared on the porch, drawn by voices that carried secrets too heavy for the wind to scatter. Their bare feet made no sound on the weathered boards. Girls, go inside now. They didn't move. Emma's eyes were fixed on the cowboy. With an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl, Grace stood behind her sister like a shadow, silent and watching. They know, the cowboy said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. Know what? Why the water stopped. Sarah looked at her daughters, really looked at them for the first time in weeks. Emma's face held knowledge no 8-year-old should possess. Grace, barely 6, hadn't spoken since the day they'd buried Thomas, but her eyes held understanding that went deeper than words. The drought started 3 months ago. It's not connected to anything else. Ain't no drought, Mrs. Millfield. It's a punishment. The cowboy opened his coat wider, revealing not just the strange badge, but something else tucked into his belt. A piece of rope, braided tight and dark, woven through with what looked like strands of hair. Your great-grandmother broke her word. Water stopped flowing to the Hayes Ranch. Cattle died. People died. That has nothing to do with my girls. Blood. Debt passes down. Emma stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the evening air like a blade. Mama, what's blood debt? Sarah's throat closed. The cowboy smiled, an expression that held no warmth, but carried something worse than cruelty. Understanding. Smart girl. Grace moved closer to her sister, and for the first time in months she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried. Across the yard like thunder, the water remembers everything. The cowboy knelt down to Emma's level, his movements slow and deliberate. Sarah stepped forward, protective instincts flaring, but something in his posture made her stop. Tell me about your dreams, Emma. I don't have dreams about anything special. It's all right, baby, Sarah said, though her voice broke on the words like glass hitting stone. Emma looked between her mother and the cowboy, weighing secrets against safety. The evening air hung heavy around them, thick with the promise of revelations that couldn't be taken back. I dream about the well, before it was dry. What do you see? A woman. She looks like Mama, but older. Her hair is longer, and she wears a blue dress with tiny flowers. Sarah's breath caught. Her grandmother had owned a dress exactly like that. And Sarah remembered from childhood visits before the old woman had died. What's the woman doing? She's dropping something down the well. The cowboy nodded slowly, as if Emma was confirming something he'd already known. What's she dropping? Letters, tied with ribbons. Red ribbons. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. She remembered her grandmother's stories about love letters, about promises made under starlight and broken in daylight, stories Sarah had dismissed as the ramblings of an old woman lost in memory. That's enough. No, the cowboy said firmly, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. Let her finish, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. The woman in my dreams, she cries when she drops them, big tears that fall faster than the letters, and then the water goes dark. Grace, who had been silent as a gravestone for months, suddenly whispered words that made the air itself seem to shiver. The water tastes like tears. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing hair that was silver white, older than his face suggested. Lines appeared around his eyes that hadn't been visible before, as if removing the hat had removed a mask. How long have they been having these dreams? Since Thomas died. No. How long? Sarah thought back, remembering strange nights when both girls had woken crying, whispering to each other in voices too low for her to hear, conversations that stopped the moment she entered. Their room, since we moved here 2 years ago. The dreams started the night you crossed onto this land. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded solemnly. Yes, sir. The first night we slept in this house. The cowboy stood, replacing his hat with the careful precision of a man putting on armor. Then it's time. The cowboy walked to his horse and retrieved something from the saddlebags. Sarah watched his movements, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. You can end this. How? Same way it started. A woman makes a choice. The sun had disappeared completely now, leaving only the memory of light bleeding across the horizon. Sarah's farmhouse looked different in the gathering darkness, older somehow, as if the night had peeled back layers of paint and pretense to reveal something ancient underneath. What choice? Your great-grandmother promised the Hayes family eternal water rights in exchange for protection during the war. When peace came, she tried to break the deal. So the Hayes family's been waiting 4 generations for payment. Emma and Grace moved closer together on the porch, their small bodies instinctively seeking comfort from each other. Sarah could feel their fear like heat radiating from a fire. What kind of payment? A life freely given. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She staggered backward, one hand reaching for the well's stone rim to steady herself. No, or the girls inherit the debt, and their children, and their children's children. There has to be another way. There is. The cowboy produced a small glass vial from his coat pocket. The liquid inside was perfectly clear, catching what little light remained and throwing it back like captured starlight. This is from the original. Well, before your great-grandmother poisoned it. She didn't poison anything. She broke faith, broke her word. Water turned bitter. Emma's voice carried across the yard, small and desperate. Mama, I'm thirsty. Sarah looked at her daughters, then at the vial in the cowboy's outstretched hand. The glass was warm when she took it, warm like blood, fresh from a beating heart. If I drink that, the curse passes to you alone, dies with you, and my girls. Free. Grace coughed that same dry, rattling sound Emma had been making, the sound of desert wind through dead bones. How long do I have? Until sunrise. Sarah held the vial up to the stars that were beginning to appear overhead. The water inside seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, like a heartbeat made liquid. Will it hurt? The cowboy's expression softened for the first time since he'd arrived, revealing something almost human beneath the stone mask of duty. No more than living already does. Sarah sat between Emma and Grace on the porch steps, the wooden boards creaking under their combined weight. The vial rested in her lap, untouched, but radiating warmth through the thin fabric of her dress. Above, Them stars appeared one by one like pinpricks in black velvet. "Tell me about Daddy's dreams." Emma looked surprised, her eyes widening in the moonlight. "You knew?" I suspected. "He used to wake up crying. Said he saw a woman in white by the—" Well, Sarah's chest tightened. Thomas had never told her about the dreams, but she'd felt him leave their bed on countless nights, had watched from the window as he stood by the well until dawn. "Did he ever tell you her name?" Grace spoke, her voice like wind through dry grass. "Lily." Sarah's grandmother was named Lily. The woman in the blue dress with tiny flowers, the one who had owned the farmhouse before it was sold, before it was forgotten, before it was bought back by blood that didn't know its own history. "Girls, I need to tell you something about our family." The cowboy had moved to the edge of their property, giving them space but still watching. His horse stood motionless beside him, like a statue carved from shadow and starlight. "We come from women who made hard choices. Good women who did what they had to do." "Like what?" Emma asked, leaning against Sarah's shoulder. "Like loving people they couldn't keep, like protecting children they might never see grow up." Grace pressed closer to Sarah's other side, her small body trembling despite the warm night air. "Are you going away?" Sarah's throat felt like it was full of sand and broken glass. "I might have to. Because of the water. Because of love." Emma, wise beyond her 8 years, looked up at her mother with eyes that held too much understanding. "Sometimes love means letting go." They sat in silence, listening to night sounds that seemed louder than they should. Owls calling across empty fields, coyotes singing their lonesome songs to the moon, the wind moving through corn that would never grow. "Will you remember me?" "Every day," Emma promised, her voice fierce with the intensity only children could manage. "Every breath," Grace added, speaking the most words she'd said since Thomas died. Sarah held the vial up to the starlight. The water inside seemed to glow, with its own inner fire, beautiful and terrible as Judgment Day. "Your great-great-grandmother Lily wasn't a bad woman. She was scared. She made a promise she couldn't keep." "What kind of promise?" "To love someone forever." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "But forever is a long time." "Yes, baby, forever is a very long time." The cowboy approached slowly, his footsteps soft in the dust. "Mom, dawn's coming." Sarah looked east, where the horizon was beginning to lighten just barely, like hope bleeding through despair. "I know." Sarah stood, the vial clutched in her trembling hand. The glass felt heavier now, as if the water inside had absorbed the weight of 4 generations of broken promises. "Promise me something." "Anything," Emma said, tears streaming down her cheeks like the rain that would never come. "Promise me you'll be brave, both of you." They nodded, unable to speak past the grief choking their small throats. Grace reached for Sarah's free hand, her fingers cold, despite the warm night. Sarah looked at the cowboy, searching his shadowed face for any trace of mercy. "Will they be safe?" "Safe as I can make them." She raised the vial to her lips, the glass cool against her skin. The water inside seemed to whisper secrets in a language older than words. "Wait." Grace tugged at Sarah's dress with sudden urgency. Her voice was stronger than it had been in months, cutting through the night like a bell. "What, baby? What if you don't have to die?" Sarah knelt to Grace's level, setting the vial carefully on the porch step. "What do you mean? What if someone else already did?" The cowboy stepped forward, suddenly alert. Something in Grace's words had changed the air around them, made it electric with possibility. "What did you say?" Grace pointed to the well with a small, steady finger. "Lily's still down there." Emma gasped, understanding flooding her face like sunrise. "In my dreams, she never came back up. She just kept falling." Sarah looked at the cowboy, comprehension dawning like a terrible sunrise. The badge on his chest wasn't reflecting starlight anymore. It was glowing with its own inner light. "You're not here to collect a debt. No, ma'am. You're here to end one." The cowboy removed his badge with careful reverence. In the moonlight, Sarah could see it wasn't metal at all. It was bone, carved, with initials that made her heart stop. T.M. Thomas Millfield, Sarah whispered. I've been trying to tell you for 2 years. Thomas. The cowboy's face began to change, features softening into something achingly familiar. The living can't always hear the dead, but children listen better. Emma ran to him without hesitation. Daddy. He knelt, and for the first time, since his death, he looked solid, real, alive. Hello, baby girl. Grace joined them, her silence finally broken. You came back. I never left. I just couldn't reach you. Sarah dropped the vial. It shattered on the ground, water seeping into. Dusty earth like tears absorbed by drought. Immediately they heard it. A distant rumbling from somewhere deep beneath their feet. Water rushing upward. The well began to overflow, water spilling over its stone rim like liquid starlight. Clear, cold water pooled around their feet, soaking into earth that had forgotten what it meant to drink. How? Sarah asked, her voice breaking with wonder and disbelief. Thomas smiled, the same crooked grin that had won her heart years ago in a church social hall. The same smile that had promised her forever and meant it. The curse wasn't about water rights, it was about separation. I don't understand. Emma and Grace splashed in the growing puddles, their laughter echoing across the yard like music Sarah thought she'd never hear again. Water ran between their toes, soaked their nightgowns, washed months of dust from their hair. Lily didn't break faith with the Hayes family. She broke faith with herself. I still don't understand. She promised to love someone forever, then tried to take it back when he died. Thomas took Sarah's hand. His fingers were warm, solid, real as breathing. The Hayes man. My great-grandfather. They were bound by more than marriage. By what? By choice. Real choice, the kind that lasts beyond death. The cowboy's clothes began to fade, revealing Thomas in the white shirt Sarah had buried him in. The shirt she'd ironed one last time before the funeral, pressing love into every crease. You're leaving again. No, I'm staying. We all are. Sarah looked around. The farmhouse looked different in the moonlight, not run down, but lived in, loved. The fields stretched green and endless under stars that seemed closer than before. Emma called from the well, her voice bright with discovery. Mama, come look! Sarah and Thomas approached together, their footsteps making soft sounds in grass that had sprouted from nowhere, green and thick and alive. At the bottom of the well, instead of darkness, light shimmered like captured sunlight. Not the harsh light of day, but something softer. Warmer, like love made visible. What is it? Home, Thomas said simply, his arm around Sarah's waist. Grace cupped water in her small hands and drank deeply, her face peaceful for the first time since Thomas died. It tastes like promises. Sarah laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep in her chest. What kind of promises? The kind you keep. The cowboy's badge lay on the ground, where Thomas had dropped it, no longer bone, but blooming into wildflowers. White petals opened under starlight, releasing the scent of jasmine and hope. Thomas kissed Sarah's forehead, his lips warm against her skin. Some debts are paid with love, not loss. The well water continued to rise, flowing toward the fields in silver streams, bringing life back to land that had forgotten how to dream. In the distance, corn rustled in a breeze that carried the promise of harvest.